Okay, I think we can get this kicked off tonight. It is 7:30 according to my clock here. And I'd like to thank everybody for coming to the February OCRA membership meeting. We've got a really interesting presentation tonight that we'll get to very soon, so I won't hold it here very long. I forgot to ask Lori if we have somebody that's going to wander around the room so we can do intros. But let me just ask that question. If somebody has the microphone,
yes,
we can
someone
walk
has
around
the microphone
room for some quick intros. Let's go ahead and do that first.
Okay. So the camera's right here. So you should look in the camera when you say your name. All right, there you go. All right,
David Wright, W4LMW, member of the club, also member of the IEEE Move Radio Club, which many members here and in Durham helped us get underway.
Dan, KR4UB.
Boyd, KO4GJO.
Wilson, W4BOH.
Aurora, KN4VXB.
Dave, NA4VY.
Paul, N2XZF.
Thank you. I'm a new guy just tonight. Derek from Louisiana. KF5CYN.
Fred, KN4QBZ.
Bill, N8BR.
KEX4P, John, Pittsburgh.
Bob, Hillsborough, W4FK.
Paul, N0US, Hillsborough.
Dave, W4SAR, Efland.
Karen, KD4YJZ, Efland.
Bill, KF4REN, Durham.
Joe, K4SAR, Durham.
Mark, KR3AM, Chapel Hill. And we got one more over here. All right, Lori.
Laurie, N1YXU. And I'm also going to list off the folks who are on Zoom. We have Ken, KO4DHJ, Jose, KD4JWF, Bruce, N1LN, Doug, KA5ETS, Randy, KF40, Tim, KC1TWR, William Bailey, KM4IWI, Jerry, KQ4JDJ, and Charles McComas. I apologize, I don't have your call with me, but I will add that. And then we also have our speaker, Jay, KM4EP. So quite a group tonight. And let me turn this back over to Bruce.
Okay, thank you, Lori. And again, thanks everybody for coming tonight. I'm going to keep the opening comments really quick so I can get this over to Jay, because he has a very interesting presentation, one that we've been coordinating for a while, and I'd really like to thank him and also Dave to come out tonight to give the presentation. Just a couple of thank yous really for the intros. First of all, I'd like to thank Boyd for getting the screen for tonight's presentation. KR4UB would not be here tonight. I'm sorry, KU4GC would not be here tonight because he's at the Duke Wake Forest game. He has season tickets, so he's watching Duke and Wake Forest tonight. So thank you, Boyd. And also an additional thank you to Mark for the audio-visual stuff. Mark will be here for our February meeting tonight and March, and then he's relocating to Seattle. So Dan and Mark and Chris and myself are working on an alternate solution, which I really doubt will be quite as high-tech as Mark's, but so we can keep going with the combination Zoom and in-person meeting and all of the audio and video and the recordings. A lot of it we can do, but we just might need a couple of items that we might have to purchase. So we're really looking around trying to keep the costs low and use the expertise from the club, which we've got quite a bit between Mark and Dan and Chris. just kind of the innocent bystander here, just watching what's going on. So that's just the two announcements. So with that, let me kind of introduce Jay. I've never met him until maybe 5 minutes ago when he joined Zoom. We've been exchanging emails here for better part of a month. But Jay has volunteered to come give us the presentation about the IEEE Move truck. And I didn't quite understand the term move until I cheated and looked at the presentation. So you're all going to learn what move means. And I think you're going to be very impressed with the capabilities that this particular group has with their truck, and actually trucks, and what they've actually been able to do and the services that they've been able to provide. I would ask that everybody that is on Zoom, except for Jay, and I will be muting myself here momentarily, please mute your mics so we don't break his audio up. He's up in, I think he's at Virginia right now. And he will be taking questions at the end. So if you have questions, if you're on Zoom, send them in through a chat, and Lori can field those when we get to that point. If you're in the room, obviously not a problem. We can just go around the room with the microphone. So with that, let me not hold this speaker position anymore. Let's turn it over to Jay, have Lori bring up the presentation, and we'll get this meeting moving. So Jay, thank you very much, and it's all yours.
You're welcome, Bruce. Thank you for arranging it. And thank you everyone for coming out tonight or staying home and Zooming with us. We appreciate your time. And hopefully this will be interesting for you. Okay. I'm going to tell you what MOVE stands for. MOVE is a project that was started back in 2016 by the IEEE. Let's go to next slide, please. So we're going to talk about who and what the IEEE is, for those of you who may not know. I had to revise this presentation because we actually now have two trucks. So I'm going to talk about both trucks. I'm going to talk about who's on the deployment team, what they do, what the systems are on the trucks, and this is a radio-centric presentation. There's a lot more we could talk about, but being as the audience is hams, then I thought we'd concentrate on the radios and other electronic stuff that we have available to us. Just a little bit on some of the deployments we've been on to give you a little perspective, and then a few words on a new thing called modular move. Okay, next slide, please. The IEEE is the largest professional society in the world. You may be familiar with it from its technical conferences, its technical societies. For instance, there's one called Microwave Tools and Techniques. I can't remember exactly what it stands for. There's the EMC Society that deals with a lot of RF things and has the last few years adopted a secondary emphasis on what's called signal integrity, which is where I usually hang out. There's one on packaging. There's the Power and Electronics Society. I think there are 40 some odd societies that deal with different aspects of engineering. The tagline, or the slogan, if you will, for the IEEE is advancing technology for humanity. And so we're going to see tonight that it's not just those societies and conferences, but there are humanitarian projects that the IEEE has taken on, MOVE being one of those. And so it has created one and now a second disaster response vehicle. And the MOVE, there are a couple of different versions of the MOVE acronym, but the one of them is Mobile Outreach Using Volunteer Engagement. And the primary emphasis is to provide communications and power in the initial response to disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, floods, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the two big things that people say they need urgently after a disaster. So it was started here in the U.S., and there also now is an international arm of the MOVE project that's working in some other countries. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we provide vital services to emergency responders. We're not technically qualified as a first responder. I would call us a second responders because, for one, we don't have the credentials to get into a disaster area that FEMA and the Red Cross do and some other organizations. but we are a National Red Cross partner, and we collaborate with them and their so-called disaster services technology team. And in fact, even if we're deployed by the IEEE, independent of the Red Cross, we still do a lot of the same work, and we are often deployed with them, and we take direction in that case from the local Red Cross folks on the ground in the disaster area. One of the things that we do is we can provide power from the trucks. We can also provide connectivity in various forms, and we'll talk about some of those in some detail. But in summary, we can give internet access within about 10 minutes of driving into a parking lot and setting up. So it's very very deployable. That's the intention. When we're not deployed on disasters, it provides a platform for STEM education. And I'm sure you've heard all about STEM. It's science, technology, engineering, and math. And we do public visibility events at things like universities and technical high schools to publicize its availability. Next slide, please. So we provide communications, energy, light, and information. Those are the biggest things that the focus groups identified after Superstorm Sandy a few years ago. We give comfort to survivors. You can't imagine until you've been to one of these. You have a high school gym with 500 people in it, and they're all disconnected. Right? You know, everybody relies on their cell phones and the internet to communicate with people. Well, after disasters, often the cell phone networks aren't working. Kids want to check their homework, even if school is in session. They want to check their grades. They want to do their homework. You know, we live very connected lives, as I'm sure you're aware, and it's hard to underestimate the lifting of spirits that happens when we show up and give them an internet connection, and when they've been disconnected for a few days and they're stuck in this school gym or something. So we do educational outreach. The volunteer engagement thing is a good piece because the IEEE members have a lot of technical skills, just as OCRA has a lot of technical skills. And we wanted to have an opportunity for the members of the IEEE to exercise those skills to help people. So that's one of the motivations behind this project. We do share the results. We have newsletters, we have webinars, we have meetings like this where we publicize what the group is doing and try to frankly recruit more people to help us. We are training people to volunteer on the trucks, as well as support them when they're out in the field. And it also promotes the IEEE itself, because it gives an extra dimension to a technical society to know that it's doing humanitarian projects. Next slide, please. The deployment teams are manned by IEEE volunteers. Oh, by the way, the first truck, which we refer to as Move 1, was designed by IEEE members, and it was built for us. The second truck, as I'll mention in a little bit, we didn't design that truck, but we have added a lot of equipment to it. We have about 15 qualified drivers, and we have about 200 trained volunteers, most of whom have technology backgrounds. And they're spread across the country because, you know, disasters happen where they happen. And so if we're going to New Orleans with a truck that's based in Durham, we'd like to be able to have people there as part of the team, because frankly, after 2 weeks, you get pretty tired and you may need some relief. So we're trying to train enough people that we can have distributed geographic teams. And we conduct at least one training class per year to train new people. Next slide, please. We have several working groups that support the trucks, including the volunteers, the STEM outreach volunteers that work with us when we go to things like science festivals and such. We have a training team. That's pretty obvious. We have a maintenance team, which, by the way, is headed up by David Wright. We have a networking team, we have a weather team, and we have a radio club called the IEEE Move Radio Club that has the call sign W4MOV. And oh, by the way, David is also the trustee of the club. So he's heavily involved in, he might say sometimes too heavily. Next slide, please. We have a lot of communication options, including LTE routers, both FirstNet and Verizon Frontline. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but they are federally sponsored high priority cell phone networks that are intended for use after disasters. And so the public safety agencies, FEMA, and so forth, all use those, which gives us a little bit better reliability and more accessibility when the sort of traditional network is either overloaded or just down. We have satellite-based internet. We also can use wired internet if it's available. So for instance, if we pull up to a school and they have internet service, we can plug into their network and use that. But we do have satellite receivers on both trucks. I guess I should say transceivers on both trucks. And we have fairly recently started deploying Starlink dishes to anticipate that question. We have IP phones. We have analog amateur VHF and UHF. We have DMR amateur. We also have what are referred to as P25 public safety radios, which are used by emergency management and state police and so forth. In North Carolina, you may have heard of the Viper network. Well, that radio operates on that Viper network. We also have CB radios and scanners on the trucks. And as I mentioned, we're a Red Cross partner, so we work very closely with them, although we are not always deployed by the Red Cross, but we often are. We have a relationship with North Carolina Emergency Management, and also we're building a relationship with the California Emergency Management folks. But I'm not aware that we have formal relationships with any of the other state agencies at this point. We have at least one member who's involved in the Civil Air Patrol, and we have yet to see how that's going to play out in practice. But we do have a representative there. Okay, next slide, please. These are pictures of the two trucks. Don't let the perspective of the one on the left fool you. They're actually about the same size. They're basically 32-foot box trucks that are loaded with electronic gear. The Move 1 truck was originally based in Durham. It's been in service since March 2016, and we moved it to California in 2022 when we, not long after we received the Move 2 truck as a donation from the Cisco Corporation. The reason we had to move 1 out to California is that Move 2 would not meet the emissions requirements, so we couldn't put it out there. But it is now based in Durham, where the Move 1 truck is based in San Diego. Okay, next slide, please. This is a cutaway view of Move 1. And as you'll see there, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, there's a satellite dish on the roof. We have 3 solar panels on the roof. We have a DirecTV antenna, which we're not currently using, but we have used it in the past. We have a radio console in the cab. I'll show you some more detail on that. There's a work area in the back with a couple of small tables and some seats, which you can use while traveling. They are DOT approved seats. There's a generator in the compartment under the driver's side on the side of the truck. It's a 10 kilowatt diesel generator, and we'll talk some more in detail about that. And then we have some equipment storage in the back and some Vidmar cabinets, if you're familiar with those, and a couple of bunks. And then we have external lighting and external power outlets, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Next slide, please. This is the work area on the left, and then the Vidmar cabinets for the equipment storage in the middle, and the bunk area on the right. The bunks were added about 2 years ago. Pictured there is Mary Ellen Randall, who is the IEEE Move Program Director. She is also, incidentally, the IEEE Treasurer, so she has a lot of good connections. And then there's a work table there with a laptop and a couple radios on it. Okay, next slide, please. This is the radio console on the cab. The upper left is a tablet. It's an Android tablet that we use for electronic logging. Truckers are required to use electronic logs to log driving time and brakes and fuel stops and all that sort of stuff. And that's what that tablet is for. We have to follow those rules as well. although the trucks are under the 26,000 pound limit, so a commercial driver's license is not required to drive them. We put people through essentially an abbreviated version of commercial driver's license training, but a formal CDL is not required for these trucks. Down in the, you can't see it very well. You'll see a microphone on the right there. To the left of that is the LTE router, which has dual SIM cards in it for the two FirstNet and Frontline networks. And we do use that while we're driving. The antennas are wind safe, if you will. And we also have a FirstNet tablet that we can use if needed. Then the switches down on the lower part are for various power systems, the radios and the router and such like that. A couple of speakers in there for the radios. Down just below the LTE router with the orange display is the control head for the Kenwood dual band VHF UHF radio. That's a TMD 710. Under the console is a Raspberry Pi, which monitors the truck systems. That's what that big display is next to the tablet above the microphone in the console. And so we can monitor what's happening with the solar panels, what's happening with the router, what's happening with the generator, and so forth. Below the dual bander head is a united CB and scanner, which we can use for monitoring CB radio for traffic and such like that. The scanner is monitoring typically public safety or fire or something like that. Okay, next slide, please. So we talked about the dual band radio. We have FRS handy talkies that we use on the truck, or really just on site, but that's between team members. They are unfortunately not compatible with the Red Cross radios. They have some similar other ones that they call UHHs. And we can loan them a couple radios if they need them, or they can loan us some of their radios to communicate between the teams. We have done that. We talked about the scanner. The DMR radios, we actually have two. There's a mobile transceiver in the cab of both trucks. It's an Anytone D578 UV3. We also have a handheld or two, the 878 UV Plus on move 1 or the UV2 Plus on move 2, and a DMR hotspot. So we've been using those for a little over a year while we're deployed to allow for the maintenance team to keep in touch with the truck, and for us to make any requests we might have or ask for information or whatever. If we have to find a service facility, then they can go do that and pass that information to us over DMR. It's great. We were driving across the country in Arizona on move 1 on a deployment a year or 4 months ago or so, and communications worked all the way across the country. It was wonderful. What happens is, if you're familiar with DMR, you're familiar with this, but the DMR radio talks to the handheld, to the hotspot. The hotspot is on the Wi-Fi in the truck, and it goes out through the LTE router to the internet. So we can have somebody on the maintenance team or on the support team sitting in his house in Chapel Hill or Florida or in New Jersey or wherever, and they can be talking to the truck while it's on road. I mentioned the P25 radio. That's a Motorola APX 8500, and that is compatible with the Viper system in North Carolina. I don't have information on what other states have systems compatible with that. I know there are some, but I don't know which specific ones. We also have a desktop PC with WinLink installed on it. So since we have internet connection either on the road or stationary, we can be using WinLink as well. We have talked about amateur HF, again, to anticipate a question, but we have not found a compelling case to buy and install that equipment up to this point. Now, of course, one of the things that comes to mind immediately is, well, what do you do about an antenna? It's difficult to do an HF antenna that that you can use while in motion. It can be done, but we haven't done that yet. We've talked about how we might link up with Aries. Again, as you're aware, probably Aries is really not active in North Carolina. So being as our leadership team is based in North Carolina, we didn't really pursue that. We have had some discussions about WinLink and I'm sorry, about Oxcom and shares. And I actually have an authorization to operate for the shares network, but we don't have the equipment for it on the trucks yet. That may come in the future at some point. We've also talked about the 47 megahertz VHF radios that the Red Cross uses to talk to their ERVs, their emergency response vehicles, but we have not procured those. They could loan them or give them to us, but they have chosen not to do that so far. So we'll see where that leads. So we're trying to keep our options open and be aware of other things that we might consider. Next slide, please. This is the work area, or I should say the radio console area in the back of Move 1. We have the P25 public safety radio hanging up above the shelf. There's a power supply there that runs that, as well as the amateur radios. The control head for the P25 radios below the shelf. And then as you'll see, there's a DMR handheld, and there's the control head for the Kenwood dual bander. The console picture I showed you earlier is a little bit out of date. We did move that control head to the back. The right-hand picture shows 6 FRS handhelds in the rack above the shelf. We have a few more I think there are 4 more in boxes in the storage area, but we have those 6 on chargers and ready to use anytime. Then the scanner is down below that shelf. Next slide, please. This is the satellite internet rack. We have a data rack in the back of Move 1. The satellite receiver is up on top. The satellite controller is the second slot down. The third one is the DirecTV and yeah, that's the DirecTV receiver and satellite controller or antenna controller. And then the bottom rack is the solar charge controller for the solar panels, and the inverter that takes 12 volts off the batteries and gives us 110 volts for various accessories and such. Okay, next slide, please. This is the bottom of that networking rack. We have 2 Ethernet switches. There's an unmanaged switch, the TP-Link box, and then there's a Cisco Meraki switch and security appliance that gives us the ability to manage the network and define different subnets so that we could have, for instance, virtually a private network for public safety. We could have another network for Red Cross. We could have another network for the truck itself and the access points that we run off of the truck, because we do provide wireless access to both the truck and to external quote unquote customers, like Red Cross shelter, for instance. We might put a hotspot, a wireless access point up in the gym that they're using for a shelter to give the public access as well as the Red Cross staff folks. And then there's a desktop computer in that rack as well. Next slide, please. Oh, and by the way, we can manage those networks remotely. So for instance, the networking team can manage those networks and the permissions and what's allowed to happen on them from home. So for instance, we do not allow people to be streaming because it's a very common thing for people to want to be watching movies and such like that, since they have sometimes not much to do in a shelter, and that would just totally consume our bandwidth. And the bandwidth on the satellites is not really that high. Starlink will increase that significantly, but the existing satellite is somewhat bandwidth constrained. There's a second rack in the back of Move 1, which provides our other mission, and that is people often have, when they're out of power for more than a couple of days, their cell phones go dead because they can't charge their batteries. So we have a whole rack full of chargers, and we can charge these solar battery packs that we can then loan out to first responders or Red Cross or to the public to recharge their cell phones. It's an 8,000 milliamp hour battery with a solar charger on it, although it's not a very big panel, so it takes a long time. But it also has a flashlight, and it'll give you 2 or 3 phone recharges. And then what they'll do is they'll bring them back, and we'll swap it out for another one and recharge this one. So those have been very popular. And we can charge about 100 battery packs at a time, although we have to watch the current draw because they do take a fair amount. So we can't realistically charge them all at the same time, but we have space for that many. Next slide, please. Here's the generator. It's a 10 kilowatt diesel generator, runs off the same 100-gallon fuel tanks that the truck uses. So it's 10 kilowatts of 110 volt AC, 120 volt AC, which runs the heat, air conditioning, and onboard equipment. We can run the networking rack off of the solar panels and batteries for a period of time, but if we're going to be running for a long time, we run the generator. And if we're running heat or air conditioning, we don't have the capacity of the solar system to run those anyway. But we can run about 6 days, 24/7 without refueling, assuming that we haven't run the fuel tank down too low before we stop traveling. Next slide, please. These are the solar panels. There are 3 panels on the roof. They're 300 watts each. And you can also see a DirecTV antenna and the satellite dish, which is stowed at present. It has to be during traveling, of course. And then the picture on the right shows the solar charger controller that manages the current flow between the solar panels and the batteries. We actually have 2 sets of batteries on Move 1. We have the 3 auxiliary batteries that run the solar panels charge up and run the electronic equipment, and then there are 2 other batteries that run the truck itself. Next slide, please. And yeah, there we go. Thanks. In July of 21, Cisco Systems donated a second truck, which we now call Move 2, and it's a little different, not only physically but also in equipment. You'll see on the right there's a picture of a 40-foot hydraulic mast, which is really a cool thing. We could put a Wi-Fi hotspot, or should say access point, up there. We could put cameras on it. We do not currently have any amateur antennas on there. The P25 and antennas for the dual band ham rig and so forth are all mounted along the rails on the sides of the truck. But so we're thinking about how we're going to use that hydraulic mast, which we don't have on Move 1. You can see in the left-hand picture that sort of thing in the middle on top is the satellite dish. It's a little bit different size than the one on Move 1, but it's, again, here it's stowed, so you can't see it that well. Next slide, please.
We're in the meeting?
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you. This is the interior view of Move 2. It's quite different from Move 1 in that it has a set of equipment racks going across the front of the back compartment. So you can see that. We'll talk about that in a little more detail. But it has lots of space, has lots of power. The radios are mostly mounted in there. There's also a conference room in the back. So instead of equipment storage and bunks, we have a conference room back there with a couple of big TVs. And we've had some instances on deployments where the Red Cross has used those for doing some of their client interviews and things like that, whether it's either hot and we want to try to give them some shelter and some relief from the heat, or when it's cold outside and we want to give them a reasonable space to have their meetings in. Move 2 has a 20 kilowatt generator, so it's twice the size of the one on Move 1. And it allows us to provide more power to, let's say the Red Cross has an empty storefront they're using for a field office. We can drag extension cords in there and power up their laptops and printers and networking gear and so forth. So it enables them to do their work as well. Next slide, please. Here's a little bit closer view of the racks in Move 2. We've got the networking equipment in the upper left of that left-hand picture. You'll see the FRS radios there, and then down at the bottom is the TV receiver and power control. On the right-hand picture, we have the video switching unit for the various displays up on top. There are a couple of computer displays down at the bottom that we're not currently using. The upper right of that right-hand picture, there's a power distribution panel, and then below that, the P25 radio. And in the middle, we have the control head for the public safety radio and another CBN scanner. So there's a whole bunch of equipment in here. Next, and also in the left-hand picture, the right side, there's a weather station. So we have some weather instruments on the roof, and we can monitor the weather and then provide weather reports to whoever might be interested. Next slide, please. We've talked about some of this equipment already: the scanner, the mobile DMR transceiver that's mounted above the windshield, and then we have the LTE router, the P25 radio, and so forth. So we've talked about most of these already. We do have a laptop in the case of Move 2 that has WinLink on it. So we have the same capability, it's just a different configuration. And as with Move 1, we have a couple of IP phones available that we can use to make phone calls over the internet if needed. Next slide, please. Here's the cab DMR radio. It's like I said, up above the windshield. And then there's the CB and analog scanner, which is in the center console above the windshield. Next slide, please. Thank you. The upper left of the FRS radios, the lower left is the P25, that APX 8500. And then the right-hand picture shows the DMR handheld and the hotspot and the trunk scanner. Next slide, please. So we as I mentioned, we're considering being part of the Shares network. We do have authorization to use that with appropriate training. But again, as I mentioned, we don't have the equipment necessary to join that network at present. There are very specific requirements for both the radio and the modem because they use Pactor 4, and the Pactor modems, as you probably know, are quite expensive. We have some ongoing projects that are radio related. We did some experiments last May in Puerto Rico. One of the problems that they had after Hurricane Maria was all the power was out basically to the entire island, and they couldn't communicate. So we've been exploring what's referred to as NVIS, Near Vertical Incident Skywave, which is it's not a radio technology, it's really more an antenna technology, where you deliberately send your signal directly up, and it bounces off the ionosphere and gives you communications, for instance, over mountains. So there's a mountain range that runs right through the middle of Puerto Rico, and they couldn't communicate from the north to the south as a result. There's a truck being designed in India, which is a little bit smaller than Move 1 and Move 2 because the roads are not compatible with a truck the size of ours, nor are the roads in Puerto Rico for that matter. And there's also a project called Modular Move that I'll talk about at the end. That's essentially a power and radio and internet station in a box, which you could deploy by way of a boat or a pickup truck, and in places such as Caribbean islands where they can't handle big trucks like we have here. It's also quite a bit less expensive than these. Next slide, please. Just some examples of deployments we've done, and I won't read these all to you, but you can see we've had quite a number. Typically hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, flooding events. They're quite common, as you can see, we've been to a number. Next slide, please. So we've had 35 deployments since 2016, and that's why we need to have such a big team, because not everybody can just pick up and go. The deployments are the Red Cross requests a 2-week minimum. We've often been deployed longer than that. So we sometimes will need to have a relief crew come in and let the original crew go home and rest because the disaster isn't over yet. Next slide, please. We'd also do a number of public visibility events, as I mentioned. These are just some examples to give you an idea of the variety. We did some STEM events in, actually that should say 2024. Anyway, we've been to the Atlanta Science Festival several times. We did an awards meeting last spring there. We go to universities and as present on the MOVE project and the trucks, and we'll take the trucks there and give tours and so forth. We go to science high schools. We went to the Future City competition in Huntsville in 2018. Whole different list of things. Southeast Conference. We even went to the National Boy Scout Jamboree in West Virginia in 2017. And we typically show the trucks off to 50,000 or so people every year. Next slide, please. Here are some pictures from some of those events. The Science Festival in Atlanta in 2018, the Philadelphia STEM High School Science Fair 2018. And we have newer pictures. I just haven't replaced them. MOVE training, the IEEE IMS conference in Boston. So we've been all over. Next slide, please. This is the geographic reach of the trucks. We've been as far north as New York and Boston. We've been as far south as Florida, Texas, been as far west as California. So it's basically southern and northeastern U.S. We are working on putting together a team in Texas. And we don't know yet if there's going to be a truck there or if it's going to start out as a modular move and move to a truck later on. But we have been in Texas a fair amount. We've been in Mississippi and Louisiana a lot. And so it makes a lot of sense to have some capability based in that south central part of the U.S. We have not been up north yet. We'll see. I mean, it depends where the disasters happen. Next slide, please. We are, as I mentioned, a national partner of the American Red Cross, and so we're sometimes deployed and working out of a Red Cross chapter office or headquarters building. Next slide, please. And we do supplement what they can do. Red Cross is big into sheltering and feeding, but they really don't have any capability to provide power, and their communications is pretty limited. So that's where we complement what they can do. In return, they provide us with food and shelter, which we can't do because we don't have kitchens or bathrooms on our trucks. When we're deployed, the conditions vary everything from everywhere from a hotel, if they're available, to what they call a staff shelter. This appearance of a disaster is not a disaster. This is the staff shelter. Might be a classroom at a church or a school, might be a gymnasium, something like that. And so when we go on a deployment, we have to be prepared for almost anything. So a sleeping bag and a mattress is sometimes, we sometimes have to bring our own. This is one of the ones in Florida after Hurricane Irma, and it was in a school building that had been in the affected area. Next slide, please. This one was really interesting. This is the same time in 2017. The American Red Cross was aided by the Danish Red Cross, who had these deployment tents available, and they have little sort of compartment tents inside them. And the American Red Cross liked this arrangement so much they actually bought it from the Danish Red Cross. But these were set up in a soccer field next to a Catholic church that had been flooded out in the Keys, and it was tremendous. I mean, we had a lot of people there, and it was really the only shelter available. So it was really a nice arrangement. They had laundry trailers and bathroom trailers and shower trailers, and it was not quite all the comforts of home, but it was better than sleeping on the floor in the truck. Next slide, please. This is another shot of the aftermath of Hurricane Irma. Tremendous amount of flooding. It made a real mess. Next slide, please. This is what some of the roads look like. Power lines down all over the place. the roads were obviously closed initially. This is after Hurricane Michael, but it was just devastated. That whole area was devastated. Next slide, please. More Hurricane Michael. Next slide, please. This is the after a tornado in Alabama. It was one of the most deadly tornadoes in history, and the worst in 6 years. It was a very big tornado, had a very long track, was very strong, and lasted a long time. So we were supporting the Red Cross Disaster Headquarters, which they had set up there, and provided communication support. We also provided communications to what they call a multi-agency resource center, which is something that FEMA sets up for people to come in and request assistance. So if their house has been damaged, or they need food, they need shelter, whatever. And so they try to set that up in a central location. Next slide, please. This is Hurricane Barry in 2019. Very unusual tropical cyclone. It made a real mess in Louisiana. $600 million in damage. We were pre-positioned at the headquarters, and typically we go in after the storm is over, because we don't want to put our teams in danger. So we'll set up the next state, or a couple hundred miles away from the ground zero of the disaster, and then we'll go in once the storm has moved on. And so we stopped in this case in Jackson, Mississippi, displayed the truck to a TV station and to some local operations there. Next slide, please. This is the after Hurricane Dorian in Lake City, Florida. We were working with the Florida State Operations Headquarters, the South Carolina operations, and communications in Greenville, North Carolina. So we were moved around as the need arose. And the Outer Banks, Hatteras Island, there was a lot of damage, so we ended up going out there as well. So we provide communication support where the Red Cross is feeding responders and the public. But we were not providing food, we were providing communications and power. Next slide, please. This is after a tornado in Nashville, and this one was rather interesting because this was just as COVID was catching on and starting. But this was an unusually long storm. It had a 60-mile long track, did $1.5 billion worth of damage, and it was just awful. Just blew buildings right off the face of the earth and flattened them. The headquarters was in Nashville, and there were 5 satellite release sites that we manned a couple of those, providing communication support and power, and referring people to where they could get help. There was a mark set up there as well. Next slide, please. This is modular move. So it's the intent again is to have something that you can deploy by way of a boat or a pickup truck. You drop it on the beach on a tropical island or whatever. There's a solar converter, which is comprised of a solar panel and a charge controller and a battery, essentially a solar supplemented UPS. And then there are devices for doing for providing internet communications and Wi-Fi to people who need it. There's again a power bank charger up on top that I showed you in Move 1, and there's some storage. This whole thing folds up into a box, and can be supplemented with a diesel generator if needed, but it doesn't have to have that. It can, if you have good sunlight and a place to put it, then you can run this as it is. So there is one of these in Charlotte. It was developed at UNC Charlotte by Jim Conrad and his team. Jim was one of the initial architects of Move 1, by the way, and past IEEE USA president. But they have a power project there, and they went ahead and built this and tested it out. Next slide, please. The Move project received a Power of A award from the American Society of Association Executives, which celebrates contributions that, in this case, the IEEE made by enriching lives. and preparing society for the future. Some other projects the IEEE has done under the same umbrella. They've done some solar projects in Africa where they've provided electricity to villages that had none before, and it also allows them to connect to the internet. And by the way, I didn't mention this earlier, but I should have. The MOVE project is funded by the IEEE Foundation, and it's all by donation. There, other than the Cisco truck and the Cisco networking gear, which were donated by Cisco Systems Corporation, all of this has been funded by donation, and all the people that run the MOVE project and go on deployments and maintain the trucks and install equipment, all that, we're all volunteers. So it's an exciting project. You don't have to be in a position to deploy to be part of it. You can work on the maintenance team. You can work on the you can be part of the radio club and support the truck when it's the trucks when they're deployed. You can install equipment. You can test equipment. There are lots of things that you can do that you don't have to be away for 2 weeks for. A lot of the STEM deployments are 1 day or weekend events. And so even though you might not be able to ask your boss for 2 weeks off to go to New Orleans after a hurricane, you might be able to do a STEM event and go and talk about engineering at a high school, or give tours of the truck or whatnot. So there are lots of opportunities. Next slide, please. And if you'd like more information, you can go to move.ieeeusa.org. There is, if you're an IEEE member, there's an IEEE MOVE community on what IEEE calls Collaboratech, which is a web-based collaboration platform. I mentioned Mary Ellen Randall is the MOVE program director. You can email her, but there's also a Facebook page called IEEE MOVE. I would encourage you to go look at the website and see what's going on. There's a whole lot more detail there, lots of pictures. We have a newsletter that goes out 4 times a year, and so there's lots of information and lots of ways you can be involved. So that's all I had for the presentation, and we can take some questions if we have time.
Yeah, Jay, we absolutely have time. Let me thank you very much. This was an extremely comprehensive and very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
So I really would assume there are some questions either in the room or on Zoom. And if they're in the room, if the microphone can go to the person with the question, or if somebody could repeat what the question is to make sure we get it recorded, that would be great. So I'm all shut up, and let's see if we got some questions.
Yeah, I have one over here. How much was it to actually get this some of this equipment activated as far as pricing it, the trucks?
Well, a lot of people ask how much does a truck cost, and I've been discouraged from giving out a number. I can give you a rough idea with some of them. The Kenwood dual band radio was about $350. The P25 radios are pretty expensive. They were on the order of $12K a piece. They're commercial radios. The FRS radios were I don't know, $15 a piece, something like that. I don't know how much the LTE router is. I don't know how much the satellite system is. Starlink, I believe, is on the order of $150 a month. We deployed that fairly recently because originally the offering was only for a fixed installation, and they've now come out with what they call an RV version, which is what we have, which is something that can be relocated. So it's hard to put a number on it. Of course, the trucks themselves cost money. The cabinets and the generators and all those things cost money. So I really don't have a good number to give you.
It's a big one, though.
Yeah, it's a big one. Yes.
Yeah.
Let me try to ease some of your pain. KN4QBZ, Fred.
Sure.
The backdoor modem that you mentioned for shares is about $2,000.
That's right.
That's, of course, a barrier to entry for a lot of folks. And so now CISA is rapidly expanding system on VARA HF. That's
Yes.
Victor Alpha Romeo Alpha Hotel Foxtrot. And I would suggest you contact Steve Waterman in Nashville. Steve is K4CJX.
Mhm.
And he'll get you set up with WinLink and VAR HF. VAR HF is $75 for a lifetime license.
And actually, you can run VARA without spending the $75, but you're limited to a lower speed.
And I think you can afford 75.
Yes.
And,
Yes, and I'm not sure. I have not heard the discussion at System about using VARA, whether it's going to displace Pactor 4. It's almost as fast as Pactor 4, as you probably know. But I don't know if they're going to move the whole network to VARA or if they're going to somehow use both. It's not clear.
they're using both, and because of the cost differential, VAR HF is catching on. Performance is same.
Uh-huh. And WinLink also can be used on VHF and UHF, as you're probably aware. We do have that capability at present, at least on Move 1. But as you probably noticed, Move 2 does not have a dual band amateur radio on it today. So we only have that capability on Move 1.
JR, Derek, KF5CYN. I'm a new guy in this club.
Hi.
Just as of today. Thank
Welcome.
you. Thank you. I just wanted to ask you if you could enlarge on, you mentioned ARIs, you didn't mention races. I'm wondering, could you enlarge on how you might be planning or in existing ways communicating and coordinating with the various agencies that collaborate through those agencies with amateur radio?
Good question. Thank you. In fact, that's interesting for me in particular because I have relocated from North Carolina to Maryland as of last August, and RACES is very active here. Aries is not. Oxcom is not. But if you're in North Carolina, there's little to no Aries and RACES activity. It's been really displaced by Oxcom, and there's some reasons behind that I won't get into, but the MOVE project is certainly willing and interested in participating with the RACES and areas where they exist. And in fact, when we were in Florida after Hurricane Irma, one of the local clubs had a guy on site with us on the Red Cross operation who was a member of Aries, and he was plugged into that. I'm not, although I'm on the Aries roster in North Carolina, there really is no activity at all. So it's very much a local thing. But we would certainly be open to cooperating with both Aries and RACES as appropriate. I don't know how to do that, but we can do that.
Well, as an ex-Louisiana resident, I was wondering maybe you could put it in a Louisiana context. Then.
Well, I'm not aware that we've had any inquiries, if you will, from Aries or RACES. We've been to Louisiana several times over the last several years. And personally, I've been on a number of those myself, and we didn't hear any mention of either organization at all. Now, I think some of that probably has to do with the Red Cross, because they have their interest in the use of amateur radio has decreased somewhat over time. And since we're often deployed by the Red Cross, if they're not interested in it, they're not going to tell us about it. So it's I hate to say it, but some of it's probably personalities and politics. It's a shame we can't get along together, but that seems to be the case sometimes. And in fact, in North Carolina, the folks that run Oxcom are not enthusiastic about RACES and Aries at all. And again, there's some reasons for that, but we can't get into that tonight. Now, I should say that the Red Cross does have a national MOU with ARRL, and so the mechanism for cooperation there exists. And I think it's more a state-by-state local thing that determines who we work with.
Okay, this is Bruce. I've got a question. If I can sneak in
Sure.
on the room.
Sure.
You, you mentioned that there are various ways to get involved with your group, whether it be, pretty much local, join one of the teams, deployment. What type, is there any formal training
Yes.
that individuals would have to attend, depending upon what their level of interest would be for assignment or team alignment?
Yes. We run training at least once a year, and it consists of 3 separate classes that are hour and a half to 2 hours each. They're run in the evenings. And David, right, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the website has a link to sign up for that training. I'm not positive, but I believe there is a link there. And if not, then you can email me, you can email David, you could email Mary Ellen Randall. But yeah, we do run a training class at least once a year.
And so another follow-up question, because we are getting ready next month. Fred and I will actually be doing a presentation to the OCRA Club about emergency communications and the types of involvement people might want to get involved in. And one of them, of course, is OXCOM. And depending upon your level of interest and how you get involved there, then there's the 4 FEMA courses that are required and certification, etc. So if you're dispatched to pick your favorite location, how do you actually engage with, I'm assuming there's an incident commander there, and how do you guys do that? Because OXCOM has to have the FEMA courses, so they know all the regulations and the hierarchies and roles and responsibilities. How do you engage?
Right. Well, very, very good question. First of all, do not self-deploy. Don't drive out there with your car full of radios and antennas and say, "Hey, I'm here to help." They're not going to talk to you, and there are good reasons for that. The FEMA classes are not that hard. You can do them all online from home at your leisure, and so that should not be a barrier. They're free. They don't cost anything. The OXCOM class is an in-person class, which is offered, I don't know how often, I don't know if it's every year or what, but you do have to have the OXCOM class, and so you're not surprised. There's something that at least in North Carolina is required called a position task book, and it's a list of tasks you have to go through and have signed off. 2 of which have to be actual deployments, and so the background is that the MOVE leadership has established a relationship with North Carolina Emergency Management through Greg Hauser, who's the head of communications, and we are on his list of deployable assets. So the way that would work is if there's a disaster in North Carolina and they felt they needed the resources of a MOVE truck, or for that matter, a MOVE team member, Greg would call up probably Grayson Randall, who's our operations chief, and say, "Hey, we'd like you to go to Asheville. They've had a fire or some kind of event there, and we could use your help." And we would then drive the truck out there if the truck is asked for, and the authorization letter from Greg Hauser would serve as the deployment orders, if you will. I should mention that the P25 public safety radios are not something we as hams can use on our own. We don't have a license that authorizes us to use those, but that authorization order would provide the authority. In reality, we might not end up actually operating the radio. We might end up just basically delivering it, and the public safety dispatchers and folks that do that for a living might be operating the radio out of the truck. So it really depends on the situation, but that's how it would work in practice.
Okay, so the training that you offer on a regular basis, though, is in addition to the requirement for the FEMA and OXCOM or whatever type that it would typically be required, right?
Yes, and it covers different material. Our training is really how to run the truck.
Right.
What are all the systems? How do you run the generator? How do you run the solar panels? How do you put up and deploy the dish? Stuff like that. It does not include driver training. There's a separate driver training class. But this would be, what do you have to do as a crew member? What's a deployment like? What do you do when you get there? That sort of stuff. But it's basically on the truck systems.
Okay.
Now The OXCOM training is a supplement to the FEMA classes and tells you how to operate in the ICS environment. You know, who is the incident commander? What does he do? What do you do as part of the logistics team and so forth and so on? So they're really separate. But yeah, to be deployed on an incident other than a Red Cross deployment, you would have to have those 4 classes plus the OXCOM class. There's another one in addition to that called the OXCOM Go-Kit class, which is the one that allows you to obtain the shares authorization to operate. It's really a station license, but in practice you can't operate on the shares network without having that class. And then there's some I'm not sure how to describe it, but just let it be said that you have to have that class.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Any other questions on Zoom, Lori? Yeah.
I think Charles was, okay. Hi, my name is Bob, W4FK. A couple of things. As far as driving a truck, it looks pretty big. I don't know if that's air brakes. I was wondering if you need a CDL class for that. And I probably missed something. You said to get the OXCOM ticket, you had to have a couple of deploys, but I'm not sure how you do that without having it was kind of like a catch-22, I thought. I didn't hear the whole thing, I guess. So
Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
listen
Well,
to that.
I didn't really cover that, Bob, but yeah, thanks for asking. To answer your first question, I did mention that a CDL is not required. Move 1 does have air brakes, and there's a separate air brake online class that you can take for that. Move 2 does not have air brakes, but if you're going to be a driver, you have to be trained to do both. But a CDL is not required because of the fact that both trucks are under the 26,000 pound limit. But we do have a separate driver training class about how to drive the trucks. The second question about the position task book, the requirement is to go on 2 or participate in 2 deployments. They do not both have to be actual disaster deployments. One of them can be an exercise, and the state does run 1 or 2 exercises every year. For instance, there's one at the Sharon Harris power plant, usually about once a year, and they have a communications exercise where you go out in the woods, and they have a simulated lost person exercise. So those qualify. They're actually a little bit hard to get scheduled because one of the requirements is your name has to be on the list on the incident action plan, which is the documentation for the incident, and that's where a lot of people get stuck. Most of the other ones are things that you can complete during those exercises, or there's things that you do as part of the class. But it is a fairly long process, and they give you 5 years to finish it, and it can sometimes take that long. So have to be patient. But they give you that position task book at the end of the OXCOM class, which is I think it's a 3-day class, if I remember correctly.
3-day class.
And so they give you that position task book at the end of that class, and then you have 5 years to complete it after that. But it does take some work. No, I won't hide that fact.
I'm an OXCOM member, and I'd like to make a couple of comments.
Sure.
You can be a member of OXCOM and then work on your 4 ICS courses, and those are available online.
Yes.
You can probably do one a day without any problem at all.
Yep.
And once you've got those 4 classes, you've got the basics for OXCOM. Then if you want to go farther, then you can go ahead and go to the OXCOM training course, which is a 3-day course. And that gives you additional training and therefore qualifications. But if you want to become certified, then you need to do the position task book. And so it's a stepwise process, and you can get as deep into it as you want to get into it, or you can stay in a very high level, and it's much more simple. And you do have 5 years to do the task book, and there's a lot of support to get that done.
So
That's right.
That's not a barrier either. So
That's right.
just and there's clearly a bias to Oxcom in North Carolina, but and you do know Greg Hauser, and he knows his attitude, and that is you leave the patches in the hotel room. When there's a disaster, if you've got the qualifications, that's who he wants to talk to.
That's right. One more addition, comment on that. Thank you for that. Just because you haven't finished your position task book doesn't mean you can't do anything. I don't know if the rules are still the same, but my understanding is that once you've had the Oxcom class, you are deployable at the county level. So for instance, you could man the county EOC, but to be deployed to the state EOC or deployed at the state level, you do have to have the PTB. Now, you can you might be asked to go to the state EOC as a trainee, if you will, and help them run things there, but you can't be deployed per se on your own there without that task book being completed. So it's not like you can't do anything for 5 years. Don't get that idea. You can still be useful.
And the state tracks your training in an application called Terms.
Yes.
RMS, and there you log in all of the training that you completed, and you also define your profile. Are you available to deploy?
That's right.
So how long will you deploy? How far will you go? Do you have any special needs? Those kinds of things get into the Terms database. And so when there is an incident, they go to the database and they're able to mine it, and they're able to identify the people that have the skill sets and the interest to do it.
That's right.
So it's very very what do I say?
It's well organized.
It's very well organized, and it's designed to take advantage of the wide range of talents that we have in the area.
That's right.
Are there any other questions on Zoom that anybody would like to bring up? Please, if there are, go ahead and unmute yourself. It's working quite well to be able to ask them from Zoom.
Okay, a couple of things.
Go, Charles.
Hey, can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't want to beat the old dead horse, the Oxcom and stuff anymore, but great presentation. I got to say the Freightliners, I've driven those trucks in the past, those style trucks in the past, and I really miss being able to drive those things. They handle like a car, actually. And you really, anybody shouldn't have any trouble driving those things. They're wonderful trucks. Let's see. I know that I've got a friend of mine that's Mark AE4 WX. He's a physician, and he works in the National Red Cross as their he's psychiatric mental health response, and they've used your vehicle in the past to do they'll have the psychologist and psychiatrist come into a Zoom call or something like that. And that's what they'll do in the back of your truck sometimes, is they'll bring the patients or people that need critical stress debriefings or having some sort of psychiatric problem, and they'll bring them right in there and do the whole counseling session in the back of your truck. So that's a great resource that you guys are providing right there. And I really like, I'll end up with one thing. I've downloaded the what they call the ATAC software, which is a GIS and it's a GIS and what situational awareness program was originally developed by the Air Force. It comes down on an Android tablet, and it's great, some great software. I mean, I tell you, you can load up all sorts of icons and maps and things like that, and share across a mesh network just like that. Great tool and a great resource to be able to use. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. That reminds me of something I should have mentioned earlier. People who are members of the MOVE team that deploy also need to sign up as Red Cross volunteers, because we're often deployed by the Red Cross, and they require us to do that. I also mentioned that you can be deployed independently of the Red Cross, but that's not typically the case. That's the minority. The STEM events certainly, but a disaster deployment, we are almost always deployed by the Red Cross. So you do need to sign up, and they have some a couple of classes you have to take to do that. It doesn't cost anything, and it's not hard, but they do require you to sign up as a Red Cross volunteer.
Jay, David here,
David.
W4LMW. On the table back here, I've got a couple copies of the latest Move newsletter and a sign-up space where if you put down your email address, I'll email you the PDF of the latest newsletter. I also have my personal and some Move cards with the web address if you want to take that and to be able to contact us for follow-up questions, or if you're interested in joining one of our many teams in whatever capacity you'd like to participate.
Good. Thanks, David. And if you have other questions that you think of afterwards for me, I didn't put my email address in the slides, but David and Bruce both have it. And feel free to email me if you have a particular question you'd like to ask. Be happy to try to answer them.
Okay, I guess that's it for questions. Jay, thank you very much. Again, this was a fantastic presentation. Thank you for your flexibility, being able to work with our schedule. I know we've started out trying to do this last year, then you guys got dispatched, and then we moved you out once, and it worked out finally. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate the invitation, and I hope it was helpful, and hopefully we'll talk some more in the future.
Well, one thing I would like to talk about, and not tonight, okay, is we did talk about potentially getting a tour of the truck, and which would obviously not tonight because it's a little dark and you don't have it with you. But sometime when it's convenient, maybe if there's a training day or a maintenance day, or if it's off duty and it's convenient, please send me a note, or Dave, get in touch with me. Dave lives about two houses from me over here, so we're neighbors. So one of you guys get in touch with me, and we'll get some notes out to the club members and see what we would be able to do that, because I know there are some that would really like to take a tour of the truck and see it up front.
I'm sure we can arrange that. I would suggest you work through David on that, because I'm no longer very near the truck, and
okay.
he is.
I know RARS is supposed to try to get it up to the RARS Fest.
Yes, the request has been made and acknowledged, and we were going to do it last year, but we got deployed.
Well, we hope you guys can make it this year. That's all.
That it's on the schedule. It's planned. Barring any.
Oh yeah.
Then it should be there. So yeah, go over to RARS Fest and see it. Good point.
Excellent.
And also the P25 radios.
Yes.
I know most states have gone a P25 statewide network, pretty similar to what we've got in North Carolina, because it's one of the little FEMA mandates they came down with, that if you want to get money from us, here's what you got to do to get it.
Okay.
Most of them deployed the P25 networks.
Okay. Well, yeah, the question then is, what sort of code plug do they need to talk to their network in their state?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, that you just bring it into a big. That's where your incident command system comes in really handy, because you know who to talk to.
Right.
To engage the radio technicians on the incident, and they'll come out and program your radio for you right then and there.
Right.
Also, I would really highly recommend that anybody go ahead and pre-program all of the non-federal interrupt frequencies and repeater frequencies that are listed in the fall guidelines, and get them already loaded up in your radio. Now, you cannot transmit on those darn things until somebody gives you the blessing, but at least you have it already pre-programmed and good to go when they do have it. So you'll have all the interrupt frequencies.
Good point.
Already pre-programmed and good to go.
Those are all in a document, or it's a little booklet, but a document called the NIFOG.
Yeah, there you go.
And so if you Google NIFOG, you'll find it. It's on the CISA website. But yeah, those channels are all in there. So good point.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay.
You're very welcome.
And if everybody has any other questions, they want to see it.
Lori's waving her hand. I think we have another one.
Oh, go ahead, Lori.
No, I think she was just like me, double thumbs
Oh,
up.
you're clapping.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Applause for Jay. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. I
Good
enjoyed it.
presentation.
Thank you.
Anyway, this was recorded. It will be posted on the OCRA YouTube channel, so everybody can rewatch it and reacquaint themselves with any of the information that was presented today. Okay, with that, I've got a couple of closing comments to make that before we end the meeting for the night. And first one, since Aurora is there, I wondered if I was going to make a comment, Aurora, about your email you sent out and see if we could round up a few more folks for your build Saturday. I would be happy to make it, or since you're there, maybe you can do that too. Okay, she's going to do it.
I
Okay.
got it.
Excellent.
Hi. So next month during the normal ham pie meeting, which is the third Saturday, I believe that's the 16th. I have pitched the idea to have make it a handy finder build day. For those who are not familiar, a handy finder is a radio direction finder device that uses a little tone to interfere with the signal, and you can use it to figure out where maybe an RF leak is coming from, or if you're into fox hunting, they're really good for fox hunting. Joe blew us all out of the water with the first fox hunt we had. And I've been scouring the internet trying to find it. I finally found the same kit, I think. So if other people would like to build one, the kits are a lot cheaper shipping wise if you've got 10 or more, and I think we're up to 8. So if 2 more people want to get a kit, we can get the best deal on shipping. So they run if you get 10, including shipping, it's about $32. And if you just want to build one and donate it to the club, and the club can hold on to it for like, if someone comes to fox hunt and they don't have one, if you don't want one yourself, you're welcome to do that. Or you can build 1 or 2 for you and a friend. And or you can order one and not come to the build day, but it'd be a shame because the build day is going to be really fun. We're going to bring a bunch of soldering irons. We're going to sit. We're going to chat about radios. We're going to chat about whatever. We're going to put together these little circuit boards. It should take a few hours. It'll be here at the Baha'i Center. Dave, yes, here, we're good. We are. I think it's reserved. It's in the afternoon, right after lunch at 1:30. But you can bring snacks. We can bring snacks if you really want.
How long do you think it'll take to build?
A few hours. I think we've got it reserved for 3 hours. It's not a really big kit. And the only thing you have to provide in addition to the kit is a coat hanger. The antenna is these circular antennas.
One comment, probably not going to be a wooden or a plastic coat hanger, folks.
Yes, a wire coat hanger, or a similar piece of wire for part of the antenna. So if you're interested, there is an email on the reflector with a form that you can fill out, and please fill it out by this Wednesday so I can get a count, so I can figure out how many to put in for the order so we can make sure we get them in time in March. If you can't find it, just send me an email or bug someone for my email, but I think it's probably pretty easy to find because I email people a lot on the OCRA thing. Or come talk to me here and I'll put your name down. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. And Lori and I have signed up. Lori's going to build one. I have volunteered to bring tools, and if people are not familiar with how to build and soldering techniques, if you're relatively new to the hobby, I don't know if anybody in the room there is, but we do have some new members. You know, there's a few people that have signed up to kind of wander around and help people with the build. It should be a fun day. It really should be a fun day. And it's something that we used to do as a club, that Aurora had the idea to do this. I think it's a great idea. And then maybe we can all play in the fox hunt when that comes around. So, and the email Aurora sent, if you're looking for it, she mailed it out Sunday, February 11th at 6 p.m. So look in your inbox or wherever you would have it. Sunday, February 11th at 6 p.m. is when she sent it out. Okay, next topic. Soon to come up, February 25th. So it's not this coming Sunday. It is a week from Sunday. Is the annual North Carolina QSO party. It's a fun event. It's great practice. This is where Dave stands up and cheers and says, yes, everybody go enter so we can make more points when it comes to field day. Great time for you to get some practice, make sure your radios are working good, your antennas are good, get familiar with the software. It's an easy contest. You know, the exchange is signal report and your county. It can't get much easier than that. Lori and I always enter. We have a great time. I do all the CW. She does all the sideband. The station is not configured any longer for a multi-2. It's single op 2 radio, so we only have one station going. But we have a great time. I would encourage everybody to give that a try. If you have any questions, shoot me an email and I'll hopefully walk you through it. And the last item I've got is the next meeting, which will be March, pick a date. I don't know what the date is. 1, 2, 3, 4, March 11th. The next topic will be very much aligned with tonight. Fred in the room, Fred Gavillo, and I will be giving a presentation on 2 topics that are kind of linked to the IEEE move truck. One of them is what type of opportunities might you have to get involved in emergency communications and public service communications, depending upon what your level of commitment wants to be. Maybe some people can go away for 2 weeks. Maybe some people can't. Maybe some people don't want to go through the training. You know, none of it is bad because it's all volunteers, and all of the various types of emergency communications need more assistance than they have. So Fred and I will be going through, you know, a bunch of different options from the most highly qualified requirements right down to the easiest ones to get involved in. So that'll be the first part of the presentation. And the second part, everybody knows this, if you are involved in emergency communications and you are asked to go somewhere, the first thing you need to do is make sure things are ready at your house with your family. So the second part of the presentation is personal readiness. We're not going to tell you what to do because you can figure that out for yourself depending upon size of family, et cetera, et cetera. But we're going to go through some examples of types of events that you might want to consider you think about before the event arrives. So you will be ready to handle your own personal readiness and can react without having to react. You can just, you know, say, okay, this is where I go to list 12 and do all of these things and I'm ready to go. The whole family's ready, rather than saying, oh my God, this just happened, now what? So that's March, and that's what Fred and I will be talking about. With that, I am done. Any other comments, questions around the room that people would like to bring up before we close her down? No, nobody around the room. Anybody on Zoom have any comments, questions? And also, March, I actually hope to be at the meeting. I hope I'm portable enough to be able to attend the meeting. This is easier, though, because I don't have to drive home. Sorry, Lori. Okay, with that, I think that's a wrap. Again, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Dave, for coming tonight, and we will see you on the radio.
Very good. Thanks.